full steam ahead with fracking. MPs from several parties will today try to put the brakes on the shale gas industry by demanding a moratorium on all developments until the dangers have been properly assessed. The move coincides with a warning from Westminster's Environmental Audit Committee that the process could pose a risk to public health and is incompatible with the country's climate change commitments. Joan Whalley is the chair of the committee.
The fact that we're going full scale ahead with fracking without having thought through the whole process in terms of how it meets within the climate change targets and how it actually meets the environmental safeguards just hasn't been done at this stage. So that's why we're saying we need to put all of this on hold and we need to think it through very carefully indeed.
Well, Labour's Shadow Energy Minister Tom Greatrex is spearheading the attempt to secure a moratorium. He's here now alongside Tom Crotty, a director of the Ineos Group, which owns the Grangemouth refinery and petrochemical plant, and they've made it clear they want to become the biggest player in the UK fracking industry. Good morning to you both.
Good morning. Good morning.
Tom Crotty, first of all, this committee of MPs says that ultimately fracking is not compatible with the UK's goals to cut greenhouse gas emissions. Do they have a point?
They do not. In fact, fracking is entirely consistent with that. Gas is essential for us to get rid of coal, which is going to be, which has twice the output in terms of CO2. If we're going to use that gas, we should use our own gas and not bring it from halfway across the world with the additional cost and the additional CO2 burden of that. So it is entirely inconsistent to say that this is anti-CO2 reduction. It's actually massively supportive of it.
Have your colleagues got it wrong, Tom Greatrex?
No, I think there may be a bit of confusion here, Gary, between different amendments which are being tabled today. The Labour amendment which I'm pushing is to ensure that all of the right regulatory conditions are in place before anything can happen, so stopping fracking until those protections are in place. Now, in relation to climate change issues, that depends on other policies, and the Committee on Climate Change have made clear that shale gas possibly, if we ever get to the point at which it's extracted, isn't necessarily in contravention of our climate commitments, as long as it's about replacing gas that you might bring in from somewhere else as opposed to more gas. So when you talk about a dash for gas, that would be in contravention of our climate commitments, but it's about where you get the gas from. And just to be absolutely clear about this in Scotland, because there's some confusion about this, currently in Scotland, the Scottish Government have the powers to block any fracking at all. They've been so far silent on that.
Well, they can't actually block licences at this stage, can they?
No,
that's
but
in the gift of the UK government.
Well, hang on, Gary, because this is a really important point, and it's something that Mike Weir said, which is not accurate previously. With a licence, you can't do any drilling for exploration or extraction. You need permission and you need the permits. Both of those things are already under the control of the Scottish Government. In fact, always have been, because it's completely devolved. But in terms of the wider issues here, what we've said consistently for near enough 3 years, I've been saying this, that we need to make sure the regulation is properly robust and the inspection and monitoring is comprehensive. The government have not moved far enough to make that the case. Unless and until they do, then our view is that we should stop fracking until those protections are in place. That's important for public confidence. It's important for Tom's business as well, because they're not going to get anywhere unless people are confident with what's happening.
Do you feel, Tom, that before we move ahead with this, we do need to tighten up the regulatory regime?
I think a tight regulatory regime is absolutely essential to give people confidence. I had no problem with that. I believe we have that regime. It is there today. Remember, we've already had a moratorium on fracking. We haven't done anything for the last 4 years. So it's not like we're rushing ahead here. The issue is we are coming up to a major crisis in this country in terms of our energy policy and energy supply. If we don't do anything about it, we will stumble into that crisis. The other issue to bear in mind is gas as a fuel is not just there to make electricity. 85% of the homes in this country are heated by gas. Huge amounts of gas are used in industry to make the things that we need. So we can't just ignore gas. We need it. So let's use our own, not somebody else's from halfway across the world.
What effect are moves by Tom Greatrex and others potentially having on your business?
I think the Environmental Audit Committee, to be honest, I think it was a political piece of theatre. It's partial. It's not a good piece of review. Normally these select committee reviews take months and months. They take a lot of evidence to come to their conclusions. This was rushed through cynically in 8 weeks with 1 day of verbal evidence taking, which we offered to attend and weren't accepted.
That
so I
aside,
think that's
Tom
really unhelpful.
Greatrex feels a moratorium is necessary. We heard heard earlier from Mike Weir of the SNP supporting that position.
Sure.
MPs, it seems, at the moment, many of them are unconvinced of the case that you are making as regards your business. So is this going to have a detrimental effect on your business?
Well, I think we have to prove to people that we can do this safely. We've got 20 years of experience from the United States that we can use. We're not starting from ground zero here. We're actually starting with a lot of experience, and we bring the right experience across, which we as INEOS are doing. We're also launching a very, very detailed program of consultation with local communities. We're giving local communities a lot of potential financial benefit from this. That's how we think we win hearts and minds. But it's a very steady process, and it has to be done with a very, very thorough regulatory regime. We're absolutely no issue with that at all.
Well, Tom,
but a moratorium will not help.
What about the business side of this, the economic case for fracking, which Tom Crotty has outlined a little bit there? Obviously, there are job implications here in Scotland if Grangemouth does become one of the biggest players in this industry.
Yeah, and that's why it's absolutely important that the regulatory regime is completely comprehensive. There are a number of areas where I don't believe it currently is. I think that's important that is set first before we then get to the stage of then people being able to make an application to see whether, following whatever guidance the Scottish Government give, whether that will be successful. And, you know, in Scotland, we've also announced over the weekend that communities would have the final say on that. So those issues could be taken into account in that decision-making process. But before we get there, it's absolutely crucial for public confidence, for the public acceptability test on this issue, which we demonstrate very clearly that people have concerns about, that those concerns are properly addressed. And in the regulatory regime currently, there are significant gaps. We've been pushing the government on this for years. Last 3 years, in the last few weeks in committee, they made some concessions but have not gone far enough. And our argument is, unless and until they do, then we should stop fracking, stop anything happening until those protections are in place. And that's what Labour MPs, Scottish Labour MPs, will be voting for today. And I hope the SNP join us in doing so.
Well, would you support what is being said by the Environmental Audit Committee? They say that fracking should be prohibited outright in protected areas like national parks, areas of outstanding natural beauty, ancient woodlands, and banned in all water source protection zones.
Yeah, the amendment which I have tabled today has 13 particular points in it, and those are two of those. One in protected areas, and that's supported by the National Trust and others. And secondly, yes, in what are called groundwater protection, groundwater source protection zones, whereas there's some dubiety now about whether or not they're covered. And I think we need to make sure that's absolutely clear, because the issues around drinking waters are one of the areas where there's significant concern in this area.
Just a quick response from you, Tom Crotty, on those issues, because those are the kind of things that do seem to concern members of the public.
And I have no problem with making sure that the regulatory regime reassures the members of the public, because that is essential. So, you know, we need to do what needs to be done to make sure people are confident. They can be, because we know we can do this extremely safely.
Okay, thanks both for joining us this morning. Tom Crotty, their Director of